Do you ever have to send money to another country? Banks charge high fees for this. There are transaction fees and the currency exchange rate. I live in Spain, but I often need to transfer money between euros and pound sterling. If I did this through a traditional bank, I would end up paying a bank charge or fee and also losing out on the currency exchange rate, which often isn't great anyway. Since this is something I have to do quite a lot, I actually got quite sick of all the fees I was paying for this currency exchange, so I went to look for an alternative solution, and I found a great one. It's called CurrencyFair. In this video, I'm going to explain to you how it works and how it can save you money if you're transferring money from one currency to another. I should tell you before we start though that this is open to customers in the EU and EEA only. I believe you can transfer money to pretty much any country in the world, but to be a customer, your address has to be in the EU or EEA. I would recommend that after you watch this video, you head over to the CurrencyFair website and click on Help and Support, and here you have a list of frequently asked questions by topic, and you can just open them up and find the answers that you need. So how is CurrencyFair different from a bank? Well, CurrencyFair is peer-to-peer. In other words, if I have 1,000 euros and I want to exchange that for pounds, then CurrencyFair will hook me up with people who have pounds and want euros, and that way we don't have to fiddle around with exchange rates. We can just take the interbank rate and get pretty close to that for most transactions. If you like, it cuts out the middleman. It cuts out the bank that tries to take fees from you, not only for the transaction, but also in the currency exchange itself. So in the overall transaction, we end up with a lower exchange rate margin than a bank and lower fees than a bank. And you can see here on the CurrencyFair website, we've got some details about the transaction. We've got a deposit time of 1 to 2 business days. So here I am in Spain. I transfer money into the CurrencyFair account. That takes 1 to 2 business days. There's no fee for that deposit. When you come to transfer money out of your CurrencyFair account, it takes 0 to 1 business days, and there is a transfer fee. In this case, I'm transferring from euros to pounds, and the transfer fee will be £2.50. Okay, let's look at a comparison between a CurrencyFair transfer and that of a typical bank. We've got a table here. Let's suppose we're going to transfer £2,000. In a typical bank, £2,000 would have an international transfer fee of about £40, and then the exchange rate margin, you would lose about another £60. So the total cost of that transaction is £100. With CurrencyFair, £2,000, the international transfer fee is £2.50, which we just saw, and the exchange rate margin would work out as about £6 on average, although you can even get lower than that. So the total cost of the transaction would be £8.50. That's a table for a typical bank, but if you want to find out exactly how your own bank would charge you for these things, you can go over to the CurrencyFair website and they have an article here, Money Transfer Companies Compared. And you can have a look through the various banks. HSBC is one that I use, and it will give you an idea of how much money you would save if you were doing a transfer. So I recommend you go over there, you read a little bit more on the CurrencyFair website and find out for yourself how much you will be able to save. But in a moment, we are actually going to look at a real transfer, and we'll have a look at the real interbank rates today, and you can see for yourself how we can actually save money with CurrencyFair. The process of transferring currency from one bank to a different currency in another bank is a 3-step process. Firstly, you transfer money into your CurrencyFair account. You then convert that money into your desired currency by basically finding somebody who wants to convert the opposite way, but that's all handled by CurrencyFair. Once you've done the conversion, you can then transfer the money out to your other bank account. Before we have a look at a real example, let's just have a look at some CurrencyFair reviews. And the first web page I want to show you is reviews from big media websites. Again, this is on the CurrencyFair website, so you might want to go and have a look at the real sites just to make sure they're real, but I trust them. So these are the websites that have added some sort of review of CurrencyFair. We've got Which Magazine, The Guardian, The Economist Magazine, the Sydney Morning Herald newspaper, and the Financial Times newspaper. And you can scroll down and see what each of these has to say about CurrencyFair. You can see an interesting bit of information there from The Guardian. It mentioned at the time that CurrencyFair had saved customers $135 million since CurrencyFair was born, and that figure was passed in February 2016. It says 230 million euros. Now, converting dollars to euros, you'll have to work out how much that is extra. That is assuming it's not a typo on the page. So I encourage you to go and have a look and see what those newspapers have said about CurrencyFair. However, perhaps just as interesting are the reviews from real users. And over here on the Trustpilot website, you can see that this has 1,090 reviews on Trustpilot with an excellent 9 out of 10. And you can go down and read the reviews on CurrencyFair. One or two that you might want to have a look at. Okay, before we look at a real transfer then, let's just go over to the CurrencyFair website, and they have an exchange calculator where you can have a look and see how much money you actually will get if you're transferring from one currency to another. Now, yesterday, in fact it was the day before yesterday, I transferred 1,000 euros into my CurrencyFair account. So let's use that as an example, and then when I log into my account, we can have a look and see what I would actually get when I transfer it into pounds sterling. So 1,000 euros would get me, according to this calculator, 785 GB pounds. If we go over to a currency converter, this is the Oanda one, let's put in 1,000 euros, and it says that the interbank rate is 789. So if I was a bank and I wanted to make that exchange, the bank to bank would be 789 compared to 785. However, what I'm losing there is, whoops, wrong page. What I'm losing there is what, £4 in the conversion. Typically, it says here that that would have saved me more than £40 at a bank, and we're going to test that in a moment. If you're wondering how that £40 has been saved, we can just go back and have a quick look at the currency converter. Remember, first, the bank is going to charge you a fee, but secondly, they're not going to use interbank rates. A typical bank will use plus or minus 2 or 3% in the conversions. So from £1,000 then, a typical bank would be saving money. They would actually only pay you £773, which is about £16 less. So from the currency conversion itself, they've taken £16 out of that conversion. If they were charging 3%, then it's even more. It's closer to 24. Let's go over to the Halifax Bank, and what I can do here is pull up their exchange rate changer, and I can actually work out what I would get if I was going to change British pounds into euros. But I'm going to have to work backwards here, because I'm on this calculator, I have to say how much of the foreign currency I want to pull out. What I'm going to want to do then is use my calculator to work out, well, if I had 1,000 euros, how many British pounds would I get? So I'm going to say branch collection here. Let me just put in branch code, select it, and then continue. Okay, so what the HSBC tells me then is that if I give them £1,001.77, they're going to give me 1,215 euros. Let's go back to the currency exchange over here, and let's put that 1,001.77 into the calculator. Let me just bring in this text file. Okay, so at the interbank rates then, 1,001.77. Let's just swap these around. It's going to be easier because then I can see what the rate is closer to. Okay, 1,001.77. If it was the interbank rate, I would get 1,268. Let me bring up my calculator. So 1,268.95 minus what Halifax would have given me, which is 1,215, and that gives me a total cost for this transaction through the Halifax Bank of £53.95. That is £53.95 or 54 euros. The Currency Exchange Fair site said it would save me £40. So let's just have a quick look. 54 euros, okay, £42.60. So that estimate of how much it would save me is pretty close. Factor in as well the exit fee of £2.50, £2.50 plus 40.41 is 42.91. So we're round about there. So this calculator looks pretty accurate. But would I really get 785 for my 1,000? That's the important question. Let me log into my account and we'll have a look. I'm here inside my CurrencyFair account and I already have transferred in €1,000. Let's just remind ourselves here, the rate quoted by the CurrencyFair calculator was 0.785. If I go into the exchange area, I'm going to be given two options. Firstly, you can do a quick trade and that just is done immediately at the best rate available at the time. But you can go into the marketplace and you can say only do this conversion once a specific rate has been hit. So the rate I was quoted on the calculator, 0.785, is that accurate? Well, it tells me here the best available rate that I have now is 0.7856, which if you round it is actually 0.786. So the rate is actually better than the one that was on the calculator widget. So they're not lying with that either. Because I'm only transferring €1,000, then I would probably accept the best available now. If I was transferring more, then I might choose one of these higher levels, better requested, because it would make me a little bit more. But for €1,000, we're talking the difference between that level and that level is only about £2, so it's not really worth doing it. However, it's a little bit more significant if you then have 10,000 or more than that. So that's CurrencyFair. This is what I'm using now to move currency from one currency to another, from one bank in one country to a different bank in a different country. And as you can see, the rates are extremely low. The currency rate is extremely competitive, 0.7856. Let's just go over and see what the interbank rate is at this moment in time. 0.789, and I'm getting 0.785. So on £1,000, I'm losing £4 on the interbank rate. If I was to say I want to request this better level, 7879, that would be only about £1 lost in the exchange rate. So there it is. You make up your own mind. I do suggest you go over to the website and have a look around. Check out the facts, read a little bit more and go and read some of the reviews because it is your money. But so far, I've been very impressed with CurrencyFair. And one final thing, if you use the link below this video, you can get a free first transfer. So that means you won't have to pay the transfer out fees on your first transaction.